On the cloud rim breathes a town, a soothing nugget in my heart. Before it vanishes like a dewdrop, trying quench an insatiable long. In replete tiny cycles of life, lingering hues of cornet ropes, pain of separation seeps sometimes, other life images still buzz on. For now, time seems so kind to stay. As I witness its frozen state, a streak caresses my heart. Rivulets flow in unheard song. This town wears an endless smile over the chest of promising cloud. Resonate beat now tease my heart, like joy swing from lofty sky. At my desk, Jugal Call, 13th February 2021. So that was a poem I wrote, around 5 years back. So to begin with, hello and namaskar. Welcome to Shitalath Conversations, 115th historic Renaissance weekend show. It's a great pleasure to having an audience with all of you once again. This has been a very amazing journey together since last 4 years. We have been doing this conversation and meeting on this conversation, going into this wonderful journey, wonderful odyssey into time space, travel into the time and space of the civilization, going into different time zones, and that's how it is. We have been, in our humble way, tried to touch every aspect of the civilization in this part of the country, and where it, as far as concerned, is the musicology, literature, art, chronicles, treatises, travelogues, legends, maestros, icons, men and matters, waterways, flora, fauna, sociology, archaeology, architecture, and many, many more wonderful, bays of the civilization. It gives really an amazing pleasure to once again. I am like that, as I said, that I'm like that bioscope wala, going, liking this romanticism to go back into this history of our civilization. And, I cannot do anything unless and until I have a software with me. So with me are the most able and the most brilliant minds of our times, who have been very kind to be part of these conversations, and they have given us so much wealth of their knowledge, their wisdom, and they are the people of high integrity, knowledge, honesty, research, mind of research. So this has always been a kind of a platform for the seekers, from the people who want to really learn something, for researchers, and for youngsters especially. And more so, it has an archival value. It will remain there for the future generations. So today, once again, I welcome you again, and I'm indebted and grateful to everyone. Today, we are going to talk about the conundrum of consciousness. Consciousness. We all have heard about this word, and we have lived with this word right from the time we were born. Especially in our society, we don't know much about consciousness. We have some bookish knowledge about the consciousness, and most of us many of us have the experiential knowledge as well. I remember I have been very fortunate enough, 25 years ago, I started this journey of seeker, not as a researcher, as a seeker of consciousness. So I got an amazing experience in the way. But that is for today. We are going to talk in a very, very broader perspective and understand this consciousness, its cutting edge scientific understanding. That's very important, cutting edge scientific understanding. Oriental Trika, Vedanta, Darshana, from that point of view, from Occidental point of view, and all the wisdoms. And then we are also going to talk about one of the wonderful books of book talk we have today, that is about the idea of India. It's a very, very, very profound book. It's a matter which is loved by all the people who are in the in the fray of learning something great about this ancient civilization known as Bharat. And today's our guest is, you cannot bring a personality to have this cutting edge scientific understanding of consciousness. You need somebody who has a very, very high credentials, who has a background, who's man of many virtues, who has learned his life like a tapasya, he has lived in this parallel track of learning this, worldly matters, worldly sciences, worldly subjects, as well as the Vedantic sciences, Vedantic, which is probably goes back as an interest, at the back of the mind. So I'm going to talk today that we have a very, very eminent guest, Professor Subhash Kak. Professor Subhash Kak needs no introduction. His research papers, his videos, his lectures are there all over on the internet. And we every time I go and watch any of his video, any of his lecture, it's another insight, another dimension. We are very proud of him that he's a native from Kashmir. He's a great Indian, and now he lives in America. Uh, Today's 115th Shidalath conversation, episode is going to have a very marked, essence because he being our guest. He's a proud native, the Indo-American computer scientist, historical revisionist. Is one of the tallest contemporary Indologist, historian, philosopher, theoretical physicist, and a poet. He's internationally acclaimed and widely honored, multifaceted icon, and he's a Regent Professor of Computer Sciences at Oklahoma State University, Stillwaters, USA. Former alumnus from the REC Srinagar, then REC Srinagar, now NIT, and an IIT Delhi, from where he has completed his very profound research, probably in artificial intelligence. Professor Kak is a resident professor in computer sciences at JNU. He is the recipient of India's fourth highest civilian award, Padam Shri, for his legendary work in science and technology. He is chosen as an esteemed member of the prestigious Science and Technology Innovative Advisory Council of Prime Minister of India. His research papers and authored books are astounding experiences, as I said, describing him to be the remarkable historical revisionist, inventor, and scientific Vedantic explorer. His most acclaimed books include Astronomical Code of Rig Veda, Nature of Physical Reality, Mind and Self, Artificial Intelligence, Architecture of Knowledge, Computation in Ancient India, Whispers from the Past, Art and Wisdom of Kashmir, the Prajna Sutra, aphorism of intuition, the wishing tree, Ashwamedha, the right and its logic, the loom of time, and the recursive nature of reality. His most acclaimed books, as I've already mentioned, we are going to talk about the idea of India. Idea of India is something which is very, very talked about nowadays, and certainly we are going to have a great understanding about what does it mean. So, with the great reverence and warm affection, I don't know what's happened to this. Why this layout is shifting. So he's in the small window yet, but I'll just try in between to adjust and bring him into the broader window. So welcome, Dr. Subhash Kak, into Shidalath Conversations 115th show. It's a great privilege and an honor. I will not let. How can I tell you and explain you how much joy and immense, delight I'm encountering nowadays, this time to find you in my studio. Thank you very much, sir. You joined us. I'm really grateful.
Thank you, Jugalji. Very happy to be on your show.
Yes, to begin with, actually, I forgot to tell one thing which I came to know just now. Just 2 days back, somebody told me that you are an Indian, you're an Indologist, you're an ocean of knowledge, ocean of achievements, and you are doing something back and helping even at this moment of your age. You are helping the people and to understand the Indology in a better perspective and going deeper into the sciences. But then again, you have one small credential, which coincides with mine, that you are from Kashmir and you are a Sathu boy. So I'm also Sathu boy. I always introduce the people who come from Sathu. I tell them that these are the Sathu boys. So, sir, we begin with this wonderful journey and today's conversation. We start with the consciousness. Your scientific research involved quantum mechanics and consciousness. So let's begin with what is this conundrum or mystery of consciousness? Neuroscientific view, subjectivity, existential view, Oriental, Occidental view. and many other views as we. How would you? I mean, for a common viewer of my understanding, rather I can say smaller understanding, we want to know from a person of your stature and scientific temper how you have understood consciousness and what does consciousness actually mean in its varied definitions and varied concepts.
Thank you, Jugalji. Consciousness is really the frontier of science because what is science all about? Science is about knowledge of reality. And there are two aspects to it. One is the physical reality, the outside world, the cosmos, then the physical reality of our own beings, our body, for example. But then,
Yes.
where does this knowledge reside? This knowledge resides in our minds, in our consciousness. Now, in the Western tradition, mind and consciousness are sometimes taken to be synonyms, equivalent.
Hmm.
But in the Indian view,
Hmm.
mind and consciousness are sort of different. Mind is more of an instrument where the information is processed, and consciousness is the light of awareness that falls on the contents of the brain, which is what the mind is. So, why is it the frontier of science? Because right now, in computers, there is an effort to create conscious machines, and a conscious machine would be exactly like us. A conscious machine would have a sense of ego, would have memories, and of course, machines already have memories. Would
Yes.
have judgment. Machines already have judgments, but they don't have an ego. They don't have a sense of awareness. So, if you could create conscious machines, that would change the whole world because then these conscious machines would say, well, these humans are troublesome. Let's get rid of them and
Hmm.
let's live in this universe by ourselves. And these conscious machines would probably be better able to deal with the environment. They wouldn't suffer from cold and heat and so on, which is what we do suffer from cold and heat. And so this
Exactly.
has taken science to this question of where does awareness coming from? Where does this ego coming from? And that's a question which is central to Kashmiri thought and to Indian thought, to Vedanta. It's the very heart of Vedanta. Where does Chit, that is the collection of memories, and ahankar, which is the ego, coming from? And they come in from consciousness because consciousness is the awareness part of ourself. Now, of course, our memories can get affected, and some people, when they grow older, can lose their memories, and therefore their mind doesn't quite work the same way as it used to when they're younger. But they still have that sense of awareness.
Right.
And right now, there is a lot of work being done in many different fields, not just computer science, but also neuroscience. If the aware self resides somewhere in the brain, can we do some imaging of the brain to find out exactly where in the brain does this self reside? And then in physics also, in physics,
Yes.
which describes physical systems, all kinds of physical systems on Earth or across space in the cosmos. But uh, who is watching this physical space? Because the observer is always outside of the set of theories. So, right now, especially because of the imperative from the study of conscious machines, and there is a lot of support for it, even from defense departments in the West. Because, well, what if you could have a robot which is conscious, which you can send to the enemy territory, and it would do whatever needed to be done, without a loss of life to their own side. But I'm happy to tell you that just a couple of years ago, I published research paper where I was able to mathematically prove that computers will never be conscious. Computers
Yes.
will increasingly do more and more of what we human beings do, and they already are doing it. For example, we already have self-driving cars. They're not deployed in a very vast scale, but there are self-driving cars which are being used in a limited fashion right now, and it's expected that they would be used much more widely in the future. And just self-driving cars, if they are used more widely, will change the world. Why? Because it's estimated that about 60-70% of all jobs that there are related to the transportation sector. So if all the cars were self-driven, all the trucks were self-driven, then 60 to 80% of the people will lose their jobs. So it's going to change society in fundamental way, and most likely population which has already started to fall in many parts of the world, such as uh, China, Japan, Korea, Europe, and even in India, population has already uh, sort of started to um, even out and will start to fall in the next 15-20 years. So it is going to change society in fundamental way. Now, um, I mentioned that consciousness is the very heart of Vedanta. Vedanta, where we speak about Brahman, Brahman is the conscious heart of the universe. So the whole idea is that there is the embodied reality, which is like us, our bodies, and the physical structures. But transcending that is Brahman, and another name for that is Shiva. Shiva
Oh,
is the universal consciousness which interpenetrates all of reality and also transcends it. And my theorem supports it because my theorem is totally in agreement with the arguments of the great Shaivite masters of India or the great Vedantin rishis that we have had in different parts of India. So, because according to this thought, um, that um, that the physical matter that we have or physical structures that we have, we do reasoning, etc. Um, through our memories and through judgment, but it's illuminated by the light of consciousness. So it is illuminated by Shiva who resides within each one of us. And that's why there is this statement, Shivoham, that is
Shiva.
Aham Shivaha, I am Shiva. And Kashmir Shaivism, for example, tells us that um, part of our suffering comes from the fact that we have forgotten that we are this powerful um, entity within ourselves. And the whole idea of self knowledge is then to turn one's gaze uh, inward, so to speak, and become one with the Shiva within oneself. Now, in this view, the mind, manas, is an instrument, and computers are also an instrument. So if individuals are different, that's because our minds are different, and our minds, like you and I and everybody else, our minds are different because they are informed by our education, by our um, uh, the temperament that we are born with, and our own practice and effort. But and as in the great image of the Kathopanishad or in the Bhagavad Gita, each individual can be viewed as a chariot where the senses are the horses, and then um, the lagam is the judgment, um, and
Right.
um, and then we have the individual who is the mind, but really it's a hollow mind because next to him is sitting Krishna, who is this universal consciousness, right? And it's really the universal consciousness which provides us the capacity to do amazing things. And but in any event, through our judgment and through our mind, we must control our senses, because otherwise senses will drive the individual into all kinds of dangerous places.
Madness.
And we will not then be, uh, then it'll be the horses who would be us. It'll be the senses who will be us, rather than the self, the Shiva or Krishna within us.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I think, Subhaji, you explained it so wonderfully, as always. But certainly, I would like to have this going to the elementary concept of the people understand it. I like the Freud's concept. They say that this is tip of an iceberg. The tip is up above, and we are just dealing with the tip. This existential, this universe which is visible is tip, and the entire universe, the entire iceberg is down. It's downstream. It's down into this ocean. So what is this difference of tip of an iceberg which is above, which is visible, and which is invisible? Slightly, I want to come down to this level, because your level, you are talking of a very high level, but I want to come down to this common understanding level to these things. Hello.
Yes. So, what is the um, unconscious, which is the self under the water, right? Which is what governs a lot of what we are doing. Now, within the um, Vedic tradition or the Shaivite tradition, the whole idea is that um, our bodies consist of different sheets, meaning structures which are progressively finer. First of all, we are the body, the physical body, which is called the Annamaya Kosh.
Oh, sure.
Annamaya meaning consisting of food, of energy. So that's the Annamaya Kosh. Then within it is the Pranamaya Kosh, and pranas are the various breaths, or
Life
not
force.
just the various life forces, and it's not just the breathing of air, but the other processes that are going within one. And finer than that is the Manomaya Kosh, the sheath of the mind. And above that is the Vijnanamaya Kosh, which is where judgments take place. Because we're not only memories, everybody has memories. Why are some people more effective than some others? Because they have better judgment. And this judgment or buddhi is based on training. And of course, certain things that one comes up with as one is born. Because as we know, in the same family, siblings can be of very different personality. Now, this is all more or less above water. Judgment is also above water. It's that part of oneself which is above water. But higher than this, but in the Western psychological tradition, we are looking at it as the iceberg below. In the Indian tradition, it's the kosh, which is finer and higher than this, and that's called the Anandamaya kosh.
Hmm.
Now, that's where the ego or the ahankar resides. And that's also called the Karan Sharir. Now, there are three Sharirs, there are three bodies. One is the Sthula Sharir, which is the gross body, the physical body.
Physical, stool.
Yeah. The second is the Sukshma Sharir. And the Sukshma Sharir is the subtle body, which consists of mind and
Buddhi.
judgments,
Chitta Ahankar
man,
as well.
buddhi. But even above that is the Karan Sharir. And Karan Sharir is the causal body, which is where the Ahankar comes in. And that's what we are not able to evaluate in our personal lives ordinarily, because you grow up, you go to school, college, get degrees, get work, and we are doing things partly as are expected of us and partly driven by certain desires that we might have. But where do these desires come in, or vasanas, or these are
Vasta.
things that we want to do? They come from Karan Sharir, which is at the deepest level, which is where the ego is, where ahankar is, which we are not able to evaluate, because as a average guy, we are just doing things. We are living through life, raising a family, doing this or that, and that's where the various practices of reaching the very heart of consciousness, which the Indian tradition, whether we are doing it classical Vedanta or Advaita Vedanta or Kashmir Shaivite Vedanta. Kashmir Shaivite is also Shaivism is also Vedanta. They create different techniques, or they speak of different techniques of going into the very heart of this Karan Sharif, um, into the very heart where your ahankar, your ego resides. And as you do that, as you unravel it, as you open it, you are sort of removing the coverings which obscure the light of consciousness that is within yourself. You can imagine that here is some light which is not physically at any place in the brain, but because it also transcends the brain, it's in the brain, it's everywhere, it's all around us and across us. And that light is covered by different structures within the mind. And by going into the Karan Sharir, you are removing those structures. As you remove those structures progressively, you come closer and closer to that brilliant light which is within you, who is Shiva. And once you see that light, you get transformed. You get access to capacities that you were not aware of, because all the capacities that are uh, the the birthright of each one of us are sort of lost to us because we are not aware of it. Unless we were aware of what we can do, we can't do it. Unless we knew we could fly, we would not be able to fly, right? So, then the second part, that of sadhana, comes in from the fact that by going within through different yogic or tantric techniques, yoga is the union, of course, of the embodied self and this light of Shiva and Shakti. That is another way you can look at it. Or
Another way.
Tantra is to examine the whole structure associated with the mind body complex. And so that also requires different kinds of sadhana, such as Kundalini yoga, right? So you're going within the very structures which are viewed as various chakras, for example, where you have heightened awareness, and that forms a process or a path by which you can travel further inwards into the very self. And to visualize it, you also have structures such as Sri Vidya. And as you know, the Sri Chakra or Sri Vidya, it's
Feature.
also, you will find it at Hari Parvat. You know, it's actually inscribed out there. So Sri Chakra is a representation of the whole cosmos, the outer and the inner, so that ultimately you journey to the very heart, which is where um, the three goddesses, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati, and Mahadurga, reside, and even finer, and that's where you have Shiva within oneself. Now, the difference between classical Vedanta and Kashmir Shaivism is that in classical Vedanta, there's no thought given to the to whether Brahman is communicating with us. Brahman is the context. On this other side of it, we are doing our argumentation. While in Kashmir Shaivism, Param Shiva is supposed to be the very heart of awareness and consciousness, and Param Shiva can, through our sadhana, be speaking to our own individual Shiva as experienced by our mind. And therefore, if one were to use ordinary categories of analysis, one would be able to say that in Kashmir Shaivism, Shiva is consciousness who can speak to us, and therefore the whole universe is conscious. While in classical Vedanta, we are not talking about whether Parabrahma is conscious or not, but we are only speaking about how we relate to it terrestrially in our experience. But but these are only differences in our um, personal subjective experience of the framework, but because ultimately there is no difference whatsoever between the two Vedantas, whether you are speaking of classical Vedanta or Kashmir Shaivism, because this difference is when we are talking about it in our limited consciousness, in our limited minds. Because if you say that your consciousness is one with Paramashiva, then obviously all those distinctions fall away.
Thank you. Subhaji, actually, I wanted to have one question. Your face is all very much illuminating, and certainly it has a very alokik glow. So I can well understand, apart from the enormous experience you have in the computer science and the artificial intelligence and Indology and study, there is something beyond that which has brimmed you. Probably it is the yogic practices. So let's come to the practical experiential side of this whole system, because I am also a practitioner of a kind of a yogic vidya. I'm doing the heart, I'm a trainer also, heartfulness meditation. It's basically Sri Ramachandra mission, but I have experienced it at one point of time. I have some stages. I have actually witnessed these stages, which they say that this is as they say, this is Jagrat, and then there is Sapna. Sapna, we are daily entangling with the Sapna, and Sushapti, and then Turya. And a state when the experiential, the person who experiences, and the way process of experience, and finally the what is being experienced, these three things become one. So, what is this tangle? Because ultimately, when we come back with a subjective narration. So, this experience I have experienced, but it is long back. I have experienced some movements for some fragment, but now it's not there. Maybe it has some made some inner changes into my brain structure and something like that, improved me as a person. But overall, it is no more there. That experience is no more there. There's a memory to that experience. So, cognitive thing comes in and subjectivity comes in. So kindly, sir, explain. I mean, with your elucidate us with your understanding of this whole experiential, your own experiential, and this mergence of these three things: the experience, the thing to be experienced, and the process of experience.
See, we are always separated from what we are seeing, because drishti and drashta, right? Who is the seer and what is being seen? There is this distinction. And in fact, our mind is always operating either in the past or is projecting into the future and is not in the moment, right? Because all memories are of the past. And in fact, when we recall our memories, those memories are also modified by that process of recall. So nothing is fixed, but in any event, it's from the past. So the whole question is, how do we stay in that moment where you are one with the drashta, with the seer? What is being seen and who the seer is become one. And now we all we have had experiences
Yes.
where we have let go, and when we let go, it's like a bird flying.
Hmm.
It's very hard for one to imagine how can a bird fly, but the bird flaps its wings and then it soars in the air, and perhaps the wind currents raise the bird high up, and that's one of the components in the process. So likewise, we have deep experience at our personal level, subjective experience. But after that experience has passed, we are back to our normal self, embodied self, where we are driven by our senses this way or the other way. In fact, one easy image to see how we operate is to imagine that we are in front of a computer. If we are in front of a computer, we'll go from one site to another, to site to another site to another site, and that can go on for the entire day. Or one could imagine, as I can right now in my mind's eye, sitting in the dub of our house
Yeah.
in Anantnag, where we lived for 2 or 3 years. And from that dub, you can watch people on the street, and you can do it for hours. And even though people are just flitting across on the street, and you don't know them, and that's how our life is. That is a template for anybody's life. All of life is spent in going from one image to another, and they may or may not have any specific logic or significance for you. And just that observation process is what consumes all your time. And this is happening even now in the AI age. All that it has done is that our connection to images has become much more dynamic and powerful. You're in front of your computer or your telephone, you can be watching images, and they can, or you can play games, because those are also images where there's certain amount of buddhi or judgment involved. So there's some interaction that you have to perform. So all of this going from one set of images to another does not bring you to who you are, because these are all separate from you. And this question of getting the seer and the seen together, which is Shiva and Shakti, or Vimarsha, together, that reflection together, is requires a certain degree of detachment from oneself, because you cannot be normally, your emotions are coloring your images that you're seeing. So the bhavas that you have, you're not seeing the images for what they really are. There's no clarity. In fact, since you mentioned Mandukya Upanishad, there are four states of awareness, right? The Jagrat, which is the normal
Aware.
aware state, the Swapna Avastha, which is the dream state, the Sushupti, which is deep sleep, and finally the Turiya. Now, what's interesting is what we see in our awake state, the Jagrat state, is determined or governed by the parameters of the day, and which is what you have: the sun rising up, and then you have definite walls and streets and different bodies who are all apart from each other. There is a clear distinction of one from the other in the Jagrata Avastha. Now, our mind should be completely determined by our experience in the Jagrata Avastha, but that's really not what the case is in the Swapna Avastha, because in the Swapna Avastha, the same mind is able to operate in an entirely new way. You can even imagine that it can fly, right? And the Vedic rishis tell us that in the Swapna Avastha, you have access to aspects of consciousness which you don't have access to in your Jagrata Avastha. Because in Jagrata Avastha, our consciousness and our minds are totally determined by the framework set up by the movement of the sun across the sky, right? Where things are clear, there's clarity, where there is distinction. Now, in the Swapna Avastha, uh, since you don't have those constraints, your mind is able to do things which you were not aware of, and you are letting go. And that's where the whole idea of Hiranya Garbha comes in, or the golden
Hiranyagarbha.
womb. The golden womb. That's where consciousness speaks to us. Consciousness, this higher consciousness, cannot speak to us directly in our normal mind. Why? Because our normal mind has clarity. It says, okay, here I'm in front of a window, and this is my house, and this is my room, and I'm going to step out. I'll be in the street, I'll walk. And there cannot be any creativity either, because you are inside the box. But in the Swapna Avastha, the mind, consciousness does not have these constraints. Consciousness has not been boxed in. And therefore, consciousness can speak. If your mind is trained, consciousness will speak to you through Hiranyagarbha. That's where Shiva will, through its capacity in the Hiranyagarbha, inform you of ideas, of capacities, of things which could be life changing. In fact, as we know, some of the greatest scientists, almost everybody, would tell you that they got their ideas spontaneously. They were
Yes.
dreaming or sleeping, or there was a vision, right? So that's where your Jagrat Avastha is in suspension and your Swapna Avastha is in command. And therefore, now you might ask, how do you become one with Shiva? If Shiva is consciousness, how does one become one with Shiva? Well, you, Shiva, or you can even use the
Brahma.
term the goddess, because our embodied self is the goddess, right? Um, Shiva is consciousness, Vishnu is the moral order associated with this universe, and the goddess is the physical embodiments of the universe. And the physical embodiments have their own logic, have their own scientific basis. So Shiva informs you through the goddess. So really, ultimately, we have access to all these wonderful gifts only through the goddess, through the sadhana of the goddess. The goddess is the embodied logic of our being. So, to all of us, the goddess is giving us hints in our dream, or when we are not struck within the straitjacket of our conscious self, of our social self, where we do things just because we are expected to do certain things. Right? We don't have any freedom. We are caught in the karmic chain, and we are doing things just because that's what we have done in the past, and that's how our instincts work. So, are we free? No, we are not different from the Pashu Avastha in our normal Jagrat self. Now, of course, uh, you look at a dog or a cat or a monkey, they're going to be logical, or a horse, they're also going to be logical. And of course, their capacity for abstract thought may be different, even though we know um, that many animals can also count to birds can count to 10, 11, 12, and they can do a lot of abstract reasoning as well. They can create tools. We don't truly have freedom. We are in the Pashu Avastha. And in this Pashu Avastha, the pashas, the strings which bind us to our nature, control us. And the awareness, Pashupati, who is this Shiva within us, if
Proto
we
Shiva.
worship Pashupati by evoking the goddess within us, then suddenly these pashas are broken and we become free. It's only at those moments that we have swatantra, which in Kashmir Shaivism is called swatantra, this swatantra avastha. And that's when we are one with the drashta, where the drishti and the drashta are one, and which is the very heart of the yoga. So ultimately, um, uh, all the um, various practices that are there in different frameworks, and it can be done in a variety of ways. You can do different kinds of yoga. Some people do kundalini, some people do mantra jap, some people do musical sadhana, or whatever else. There could be many different kinds of sadhanas. They ultimately are supposed to take you to that moment of freedom, to that space of freedom, which is where Shiva resides. And I can tell you, indeed, that is transforming. And suddenly you have ideas that you didn't know existed. And that's how all um, all progress, even at the social level or societal level, or for the whole world, is made. Because otherwise, look at anybody, whether they are in America or in India or in any other country. An average person is only doing what they've been taught to do. They are in the Pashu Avastha. And of course, they have family, and so do Pashus have families. Pashus also feel compassion for each other. But that is not enough to take you to that point of freedom, because at that point of freedom you are set free. In fact, that is what punarjanma is all about. This whole idea of moksha is all about. The whole idea is that you should get mukti from the fetters, from the strings that bind you to the past, because all of nature, all of prakriti is bound to the past, excepting Shiva, because Shiva is only thing that transcends this reality. And as I told you, Uh, 2 years ago, I published a paper where I was able to also prove it mathematically that indeed part of that the free aspect of consciousness is transcendent. It it's outside of this reality because whatever the physical reality is bound to the past, and if it's bound to the past, it cannot do anything which is new, and therefore, really Shiva uh, consciousness, universal consciousness, works through each one of us by when we are one with that consciousness through our sadhana of the goddess, which is the framework through which this embodied universe works. Then we channel what Shiva wants us to do, and that is when we are free, as in Kena Upanishad. When we don't think we are free, we are free. When we think we are free, we are bound. The average guy thinks I'm a free person, but really, in fact, even in neuroscience, they've been able to show that most decisions, or well, all decisions, are taken in your cortex uh, prior to when you think you are making the decision. So really, you're not free at all, but you are indeed free when you are one with the Shiva within yourself, Shivoham.
That's wonderful. I mean, this may be speaking part of your experience as well, because you must be practicing some yogic system. But one thing I want to say is, Vaji, in a system which I mean, which a very, very, very बहुत ही profound system है, तो हजारों सालों से there is a one wonderful thing, that is transmission, pranahuti. Pranahuti, like we have Sampadan, it's a very small way in Kashmir Shaivism, but here it is abundant. It's like, I mean, streams. They come and they unfasten your, this yogic chakras, and then the process starts. Actually, here the conceptuology is almost similar, what you said, that the in between these subtle bodies, as we say, the, super consciousness and super self and super consciousness and subconsciousness. So there's a storage over there, like the floppies are there. Those are the impressions we generate. We go on adding and adding and adding and adding all that. So at the one point, something higher, when you reach to the consciousness level, it cleans up. But we are going to adding on and adding on, because we are part of that, as you said, cyclic frame. But there's a methodology here where we do a cleaning for our day-to-day impressions, so that they don't become sanskaras. So sanskaras are gradually removed, and it's then filled with the great master's transmission. So something like that happens, and some that movements. On its own, this process may be very tedious and very difficult. One. Another thing I want to ask, that all these great people, I know Subhash Kak is certainly, your frame of your this cognitive apparatus, your brain structure, it might be definitely much better. And when we talk about Einstein, or for that matter anybody from the Oriental wisdoms as well, they were the bestowed with that kind of an expansion of their consciousness. I mean, is it possible that while you are living, you are born in whatever avastha of your consciousness can get, lift and flip into this janma while you are living here?
Absolutely. Our consciousness, there is only one consciousness, Shiva, but
Shiva.
our experience of it varies. From this one comes multiplicity. And you're absolutely right. There needs to be cleansing every day of oneself, and that's why one needs discipline, etc. You need
Yes.
sadhana. Without that, it's so easy for one to be carried by the vasanas, because the vasanas are part of the current sharir that we are born with, and in order to have control over that, discipline over that, you need to do cleaning, cleansing, and awareness. Now, of course, people do it in many different ways, as we mentioned. You can do your sadhana, mantra or japa, or whatever other yogic sadhana,
Devotion, or anyway,
or yeah, or even study, scientific study or devotion. Absolutely. Karma yoga, as in the Bhagavad Gita, you can do karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, or
Nishkam.
whatever else. And that is a way to go forward. In a chariot also, the horses, the senses have those blinkers, so that you only see in the direction where you're supposed to be going, because otherwise the senses would be driven to go off the road, right? So this is all a part of practice. And here, clearly, the guru can, by inspiration, provide that shortcuts to the sadhak, because you need faith. It's like you want to swim, and if you are logical as a child, you would say, well, I'm scared, I'm going to drown, and you will not be able to swim at all. And there are some people who are never able to swim all their life. But if you had faith in your guru, and the guru says, jump into the water and just thrash your arms and you will be fine. It's that those kinds of jumps that that,
Samarpan.
that that the inspiration from the guru can provide you, and they can shorten your path. But ultimately, of course, the journeying is to be done by the individual's mind, because we are normally, it's the mind which carries us wherever we are going, right? But how to go to the light? Because mind is all about images. The light is beyond images. It's that transcendent thing. So how to go to that source, how to go to Shiva, to be one with that Shiva. And it's that feeling of being one with Shiva which also transforms you, which also cleanses the past, which is what gives you moksha, right? Which gives you mukti. And then you're not bound by the sanskaras. The sanskaras are both good and bad. They are good
Yes.
to the extent that they provide you a certain path. Okay, be on this path. And that's why childhood upbringing is so important, those sanskaras. But ultimately, at some point, you have to know that these samskaras will only keep you on the highway. And that's not where the magic is. At some point, you have to get off the highway and go to that lake and that river and that garden, which is where the magic will happen, right? And therefore, you have to create new samskaras. And this sadhana provides you the capacity for creation of samskaras within yourself, the new ones, which take you to freedom. So, freedom, samskaras work both ways. They imprison you in a good way to discipline you, and then finally you have to create new sanskaras for yourself to become free.
It's like as our master says, that it's like that golden cage, and or the iron cage. Both are the cages basically. They are imprisoning you, but ultimately you have to leave golden. But that is necessary in the beginning because as a child, as you rightly said. So that's so wonderful, sir. It's very, it's very. I mean, I'm experiencing the state. How you explain this development of a man when he's born, how it is required to have a disciplined life, and then at one point of time, then he has to swim. He has to go to this direction and develop that sense of discrimination, viveka, and when he starts and doing the karma or whatever way. Sir, we'll have a just because we have to cover other topics also today. We have a book talk on this, idea of India. That's wonderful book which is going around. But before that, I will have a small photo tour. I didn't have access to your photos, but yes, I got it from somewhere, from the internet. So we'll have a small photo tour in which there are books also there. You can have a brief, description of the books, and then we'll finally after this tour we'll just go for the main book talk. Just a minute, sir. It is just to bring, kind of a. I'll play a bit of music. Very brief one. Sir, this is you.
This is in Sweden or Norway. I forget.
Okay. Architecture of Knowledge. This book.
Yeah, it gives a general view of quantum mechanics, neuroscience, computers, and consciousness. This was published more than 20 years ago. It's part of a series of books on science and civilization, series of 100 books,
Series of
edited
100.
by many people. Yeah.
So wonderful. So this is probably your I don't
Oh,
know.
this is a picture I posted on Instagram just a couple of
Yeah.
days ago. This is from my son's apartment in Miami.
Oh,
His
wonderful.
Yeah, his from the ninth floor. It overlooks the Atlantic.
The panoramic view.
Yeah, right.
Beautiful. So I thought it's your home and you're taken. I picked it from the
No, no.
Instagram only.
This is my son. My son and daughter both live in Miami,
Right, right.
and this is from my son lives in a high rise, and my daughter lives in a house. Yeah, that's the view from my daughter's house from in the backyard. And as you can
Backyard.
see, it's a very beautiful sight. There is a tiki hut, which is like a Polynesian hut where under which we can sit. And there's a swimming pool, and there is my daughter's house is on to the right, and there is a guest house to the left of this backyard.
And it's covered by the trees. These are I don't
Lots of
know.
trees. Yeah, lots and lots of trees.
This must be your younger age when you were in your
This
engineering.
this is when I was much younger. I think I was doing my PhD, or I just finished my PhD. Maybe I'd finished. I was an assistant professor at IIT Delhi.
Oh my God. But still very young. 22, 20, 20,
Yeah,
21.
I finished my PhD very young, 23, and I was immediately hired by IIT Delhi. Hey, I chose the wrong career.
No, no, sir. I
I
don't
should have
think you would
gone.
have reached where you are
I should have
today.
gone to Mumbai after seeing this picture.
But you look very handsome. Probably you could be having a very handsome personality for a modeling as well.
Yeah, and this is we were visiting. Now I remember the previous picture was in the United States itself. After I had joined Louisiana State University as a professor, and this was a visit to Czechoslovakia. This is
Oh,
Prague. So these are building. Prague is a very beautiful city in Central Europe.
Prague, yes. Old architecture.
Yeah, Prague used to also be the center of the Pope for many centuries, and so this is the background from the hill.
Here, your looks are now from the previous picture. Your looks have become more contemplative and more, wisdomful. I mean, you're growing with this whole
Right.
picture too. Matter and the mind.
Matter and Mind. This is a book on Kanada's Vaisheshik Sutra. There are 6 darshanas, as we know, which explain what the Vedic system is. And these darshanas are Purva Mimamsa, Vaisheshika, Nyaya, Sankhya, Yoga, and
Sankhya
Vedanta.
Padam.
Now Vaisheshika is about the physical world and the laws which govern the evolution of the physical world. And I discovered some amazing stuff in it. I translated this book. For example, Newton's laws of motion, that an object in a state of rest continues in a motion, and to every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, are already present in almost exactly the same form in this 2,500-year-old book. It's a pity that people are not aware of it. In any event,
Right.
I have the original Sanskrit plus the translation in this book.
Wonderful. And this is, I don't know, it is some cowboy written some. I
This
picked it.
is at Oklahoma State University. This is some kind of a feature. Yeah, right. They did a feature on me.
So, I mean, I saw the title and I found it very flamboyant. I thought, why not pick up Katsa from here?
Why not? Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
is Loom of Time. This is very
a
interesting on the recursive nature of reality. That's so wonderful. I mean, I don't. I have to
This is a
fascinate
very
over.
important point. What is recursive nature of reality? See, the central idea in understanding in the Vedas is Yat Pinde Tad Brahmande, or Yat Brahmande Tad Pinde. What means, as in the Pind, which is the body, which is the brain, let's say, so in the whole cosmos. What it means is the structures in our mind reflect or correspond to the structures in the cosmos. And in fact, it's because of this recursion that we are even able to make the sense of the universe. Because you could always ask, how are we able to understand the cosmos? We are like a speck of dust. Our bodies are like a speck of dust on Earth, which itself is like a speck of dust in the whole cosmos. If you look at the stars and galaxies and so on, Earth is like a speck of dust. How can a creature which is as small as we are even hope to make any sense of the reality? That's because of this recursive relationship, that the outer is mirrored in the inner. The very heart of the Vedas. This is
Kashmir Shaivism also?
Kashmir
Recognition?
Shaivism, of course. The
At the
very
big- at the
heart
big-
of Shaivism. Yes. So
What
this
is it?
book explicates this at many different levels. As someone who, when I was a young boy, I wanted to be a writer, a poet, but my mother said, no, you've got to do engineering and sciences, which is what I did. But at my heart, I'm really a poet, or I want to express things as concisely as possible. And that's what I've tried to do in small essays in this book, The Loom of Time. And also, ultimately, the deepest mystery that there is the mystery of time. And consciousness is what captures this mystery of time. And these are issues which have been a part of the thought processes in Kashmir for millennia. And as we know, Kashmir was one of the most productive places in the whole earth in terms of
I
contributions.
just did a feature last Sunday in which I told to this world, to my Punjabi friends, they were not aware of it, that Urdu, the beginning and evolution of Urdu, it is around hundreds and 400 Kashmiri Brahmin poets have contributed it from Hindavi to mature as Urdu, and 50% of Sanskrit scriptures are contributed by people who lived in Kashmir or who were Kashmiris. Yes, sir, please.
Right, and they were not, and Kashmir's population could not have been that large. So great contributions that have been made, and of course they've been made throughout India. India is a very special place because
South
of
India.
this South India as well, and there has always been a great connection between Kashmir and South India. And in fact, in South India, they worship Sharada, Kashmir Purvasini. Sharada,
Kashmir
the goddess
Purvasini.
of learning, who lives in Kashmir Pur. And there is Shaivism, the Shaiva Darshan also in Tamil Nadu. So there's
Tamil Nadu.
tremendous. And also the greatest philosopher from Kashmir was originally, his ancestors had come from Kannauj with Lalitaditya. I'm talking of Abhinav Gupta.
Abhinav Gupta.
Yeah, so there has been movement of people back and forth between Kashmir.
Back and forth. You see this Sharangadeva, his ancestors came from Kashmir, and he made this Karnataka Parallel School of Music, Indian School of Music, grammar, syntax.
Absolutely. Sharangadeva was a Kashmiri who wrote...
and Kumarajivi and many others, unknown.
Kumar Jeev did the translations into Chinese, and those translations are still chanted to this day, of the Lotus Sutra, for example.
That's so wonderful. Yes, so it's so great. Sometimes I tell my friends that come out of it. Okay, it's good to enjoy your holiday, go to the malls, but study a bit. Now this is the plethora of great knowledge. Your books. If they pick one by one, any youngster, then it will open up another drishti, another vision. It is really amazing to have these books around and somebody writing it, somebody who's an analytical brain, who's a logical, who's proven his life as a scientist, as an engineer. So this is for today's topic here. Angle of consciousness. You're in a classroom?
I think so. This is with a student. Yeah, with a classroom, with a student. This is in Oklahoma. Right.
You are a kind, compassionate, teacher.
Yeah,
You
a
appear
student of mine, yeah.
very nice and very, posturing. This is Prajna Sutra. aphorism
Yeah.
of
So
intuition.
these are, I was flying in the US and suddenly these 18 sutras came to my mind, and they are in Sanskrit, as you can see in this book. And you can even Google it and you'll probably get a manuscript copy for free. And these sutras represent, in my subjective view, the very heart um, of, of the Vedas. And so what I did was I took these 18 sutras, translated them, and then wrote a commentary.
That's the one.
This is in Perth, Australia, where I've been a visiting professor from time to time. Very beautiful city. 6 years
Oh.
ago, 6, 7 years ago, yeah.
Nature of Physical Reality. This is the third edition.
Yeah, this is a book I wrote in the late 80s, where I argued that ultimately there is a limit to what science can teach us, and there will always be a certain portion which will remain beyond logical analysis. And this is, of course, also borne out by science itself. There are certain statements in any logical system which can neither be proven or disproven. And then we are also finding it in various paradoxes of quantum mechanics or of physics and of neuroscience. So I think this book, even though I wrote it very young, and then this particular edition is 10 years old, my intuitions have been sort of confirmed by the whole march of science in the last 3 or 4 decades. 4 decades.
That's the one. I think you have been all your. I mean, the kind of amount of books you have written, it must have consumed almost all your life.
Yeah, no, this is a set of papers by various scholars on computational thinking and logic, etc., in India, which most Indians are not aware of. And there are many leading Western scholars also who contributed to this volume. For example, one of the papers here shows how the binary number system was already in use in India in relation to musicology by Pingala about 200 or 300 BCE. So there's some nice tidbits of information in this book.
In our last conversation, you had said something about the medicine. We'll talk about that later. That from binary to the triad. I mean,
that is a very important point. Modern medicine is based on binary logic, allopathy. And what does allopathy actually stand for? Allopathy means treatment of symptoms. Now, when you look at it mathematically, binary is not optimal. Ternary is optimal. Ternary means in threes. And somehow, by intuition, the rishis were aware of it. That's, in fact, the Vedas themselves are called Traividya. There are 3 goddesses, or you can talk about Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, right? There are 3 of them. So everything is in threes. And in Ayurveda is based on threes. There are 3 doshas, right? Ayurveda is about wellness, about maintaining of health by making a balance of these 3 doshas. So in that sense, from a logical perspective, Ayurveda is superior to allopathy, although it needs to be modernized. And this probably also explains why allopathy is facing such a crisis right now in the West. They are unable to replicate 80 to 90% of all research, and medicines are certified and then they find out they don't work. America is facing the hugest obesity crisis or health crisis. People pop 40, 50, 60 pills every morning. They can't think, they're in a fog. And so the whole question of health needs to be readdressed.
So this is the frozen lake?
This is our town in Oklahoma. Our lake 2 weeks ago got frozen. And totally, it was extremely cold. The maximum temperature was, I think, minus 20 degrees Celsius. Extremely, extremely cold.
I
This
have
is
heard
just
about that. Dal used to get frozen, then Bakshi Saab, operated by running a vehicle, jeep over it. There's an
right,
incident
right.
our elders used to tell us about. Dal
Right.
Lake.
So we this is not very far from our home where we live. So we just walked over to it and took a picture. Yeah, this is my very good friend, the wonderful scholar David Frawley, who's written many, many books, 30, 40 books on the Vedic
Right.
tradition. And he's a self-taught person. He grew up in Colorado and he was attracted once he was in the library as a young high school student. He saw a book on the Vedas and that changed his life. And this is a
Oh.
picture we took just a few months ago in Aspen, Colorado, which is where we had gone for spending the summer.
And Vedas also changed the life, as you have mentioned in your talks, of many, many scientists. I mean, not
Of
life
course,
exactly.
some of the greatest scientists have been inspired by the Vedas, like Schrodinger. In fact, all of modern physics is based on quantum mechanics, and the creator of quantum mechanics was a Austrian scholar, famous scholar, Erwin Schrodinger, who claims in his own autobiography that the central idea of quantum mechanics came to him from the Vedas, from the Upanishadic Mahavakya, I am Atma Brahma.
Right. Even Einstein mentioned it somewhere, Adolusi and all people. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's a whole list, your list.
All the great modern scientists, because when you go to the very frontiers of modern science, you have to talk not only of matter but also the observer. And the Vedic tradition is all about the observer. They also are about matter, as in the Vaisheshik Sutras, but they are also about they're about the observer. Who is the observer? About consciousness, right? And that is the frontier of science, and people realize it, and therefore there is tremendous attraction in the West for learning Sanskrit. In fact, I can tell you a story, personal story. One of the most influential people in America, who's a advisor to presidents and so on, once my son said, "Hey, why don't you come over and meet him?" So I flew down to this place because my son knows him, and he was very welcoming, and he's got an American wife. So we were there, we had tea, and then his wife said, "Hey, why don't you come up to this second floor where they had a puja room?" I was quite surprised that they made me sit down, and then this American lady, did some stotras in Sanskrit to welcome the guest, Atithi.
My
You know,
goodness.
beautiful. So a lot of people in the West do it quietly. They're learning. And why? Because if you're open-minded, Sanatan Dharma, what the Vedas are, is Sanatan Dharma. What does Sanatan Dharma means? The eternal laws of reality, of nature, including us, right? That is what Hinduism is all about. That is what Kashmir Shaivism is all about. That is what Vedas are all about. They are not sectarian. They're not saying you will go to hell if you don't do this or do that. They say
So is-
these are
so is-
laws
yeah.
of truth. And any open-minded person will get attracted to them because everybody wants to know what the truth is. And this is Sanatan Dharma is the path that's been sketched out for any human being to find truth for themselves. No coercion, no compulsion.
And besides, it's not linear. I mean, you can have it at your own. It's not linear. It is many dimensional.
And you can choose your own path at your own pace. You can say, well, right now I'm busy, I'm raising my family, fine, that's great. And I want to do it now. I want to, do whatever. But what it says is be ethical, be truthful, be moral, because that's where the dharma part, the four purusharthas.
Purusharth.
Dharma mean morality, artha, ambition, kama, desire. Good to have desire, so long as it's within the framework of morality, and moksha. Moksha means freedom, also tyaga, because freedom from attachment is tyaga. So you have to be prepared to give up. And so long as you are within the guardrails of dharma and tyaga, be ambitious, do well, and have desires, and change the world. And in fact, my argument is, if Indians are so successful right now all over the world, and they had all the greatest companies everywhere. That's because they are good people, because they want to live life according to Sanatan Dharma for the goodness of all.
Yes.
Yeah, this was, I think, the World Book Fair 2025. There's a publisher in Delhi who's published these 3 books of mine. The Idea of India, Eternal Bharat, which is a summary of what Sanatan Dharma is all about. In fact, eternal meaning Sanatan. And the third book is The Age of AI, which is where the world is going. All of the world is going towards AI. Machines will do whatever human beings are doing right now. They'll do reasoning, this and that. So there'll be not much left for humans. There'll be a lot of unhappiness, wars perhaps. Populations will collapse, and populations have already begun to collapse in many parts of the world. So the world is going to go through the most excruciatingly painful change. And I believe that the only way out would be Sanatan truth for everybody. And it's, for all human beings and all life to come together and to celebrate the mystery and magic of our existence on earth.
Wonderful. That's true, sir. I mean, even for that matter, the gadgets, this technical gadgets, even if it takes all employment from the humans, it overtakes human. But at the same time, even if I can see many of our generation, they have lost this memory. There's a loss of memory. There's a loss of perception. There's a disintegration of psychological.
Jugalji, you make a great point, and in fact, this is a point that was also made to me the other day by my friend David Frawley. He says, look, when you're looking at your phone all the time, the world appears two-dimensional, and it's changing the very structure of your mind. So David was saying that, look, the least a person can do in the evening, go out into the open and look at the stars. At least that will act as one way of freeing your mind from this prison of two-dimensionality, of just images. And just by just doing images, your mind is getting imprisoned and constrained into a way which separates from you, also from your own memories, because your memories are not two-dimensional. They are in multiple dimensions. But once you force your mind into two dimensions, there will be loss of memory of various kind.
You said a beautiful thing other day in some show. All your shows are wonderful to watch. You said that like that in Kashmir Darshan, the sun is there, but when the sunlight comes and it falls on the different utensils or different vessels, it has that is the consciousness. You're talking about the consciousness. Please tell us, please.
There is only one Shiva who is like the sun outside, but the same sun outside in a million different pots of water that all will shine, right? So the same Shiva is within each one of us, within every human being, and within animals also. I think this is beautiful, and it's true. I can tell you from my personal, not just intellectual study, but from my personal sadhana, and also this mathematical theorem that I've proven, which says that there is one consciousness, that indeed this is true. And if it's true, this should be the way for all of us to come together and celebrate the same divinity within each one of us.
That's true. Wonderful. The Wishing Tree, Presence and Promise of India. I don't know. This seems to be a bit political.
This was published many years ago. This is a book on different essays on history of India, and intellectual and spiritual history of India. Nice essays.
By different authors contributed.
No, my own essays.
Your own. Okay. Sir, I'm amazed at your body of work. Here you are in a very lighter mode. You are in the three-dimensional reality.
This is just a couple of years ago in Key West. Key West is, if you go down from Miami, and there are keys are named for islands in American English. In Florida, you call them keys, Key. So there's about 200 miles of one key followed by another. So it's very narrow, and they have combined them. And at the very end is a key called Key West, which is only 30-40 miles north of Havana in Cuba. And so it's a great tourism place,
Havana.
and that's where we were, and that's where um, Ernest Hemingway, the American novelist,
Ernest
lived
Hemingway,
for
yeah.
some time. Yeah, lived, and I don't know whether he
Wonderful.
shot himself to death there, but we visited his home as well in Key West.
I still remember is that our college book, that Old Man and the Sea.
Oh, I remember that book very well. A beautiful book. Beautiful book. The Old Man and the Sea.
Wonderful. I don't know. I mean, committing suicide, somewhere actually this happens because you lose your inner strength or connection to the.
No. What had happened to him was that a year or two prior to that, he had an accident where the plane he was in crashed. This was in Africa.
Oh.
Or somewhere. And then there was another accident. So he, after that, was in tremendous excruciating physical
Oh.
pain. And it's now, it could have been other psychological pain as well, but he was in tremendous pain, so he decided to end his life. He was quite young. He was still in his early 60s, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this is a book we just came out a few months ago, and I love this book, Whispers from the Past, Art and Wisdom of Kashmir, which is my take on the culture of Kashmir. So it gives the political history as well in short chapters, and also something on Kashmiri art, music, painting, and
Paintings.
yeah.
It's about the
And storytelling. And storytelling,
Storytelling.
like Yoga Vasishta, in my view, the greatest storybook that has ever been written. Or there is another Katha Sarit Sagar. So I
Katha Sarit Sagar is very popular. I mean, it has gone from here to Iran and changed its colors. Yeah, even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have some stories, and Panchatantra as well. And the edition, that's also from Kashmir, the edition which became popular all across the world. So this book, Whispers from the Past, Art and Wisdom of Kashmir, is a kind of a small digest, if you will, of Kashmiri culture and civilization and arts.
And travels for the times.
This is when I was in college.
This is your college, the younger days, teenagers.
Right. They change, and this is just a few months ago in Aspen, Colorado. Our son was spending the summer there, so we went down there for a couple of weeks, and we were just taking a walk in Aspen. It's a lovely town. It's a lovely town in Colorado, in the mountains.
Colorado. And this is something Ashwamedha, wonderful.
Yeah, and analysis, because a lot of misunderstanding about what Ashwamedha was all about. And this is something I wrote many years ago, 25 years ago.
25
years ago. The backstory is I was in Boston at the museum, and the curator who was looking after the Indian edition said something about Ashwamedha which was so superficial and wrong. So I thought I should quickly write a book on it, which is what I did.
This is your lecture, probably, somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere more recently, some lecture. Right. And this book, Eternal Bharat, which I recommend to you. It has got some good stuff, very, very good stuff on Vedanta, especially. It's got some wonderful stuff on Vedanta. On Karan Sharir, we talked about
Karan
Sukshma Sharir,
Karan
Sharir, and all that. Yeah, and also on architecture. It has something on. This is a book I wrote in the 90s. I discovered a code in the very structure of the Rig Veda, which explains the Jyotish knowledge of the ancient Indian times. So it is a spontaneous discovery. Spoke about this Hiranyagarbha. So all this came from the Hiranyagarbha. I am not responsible. It came in. I was watching. I was reading a book. I think I was reading a magazine, the New Yorker, and suddenly out of Hiranyagarbha came this whole theory of the astronomy of the Vedic times, on which I published a book ultimately.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, this is in college days. Yeah,
Full of aspirations. Huh?
right.
This
Yeah,
will
the
talk
idea of
later.
India. Yeah, this was
First of
published
all,
2 years ago.
we'll close this photo session here. Here at this beautiful photograph of yours. Could you explain a bit?
Yeah, this is this is in Miami, and this is our daughter's Australian Australian something dog. It's an Australian breed. So
Okay.
yeah, this is very close to my daughter's home, and this is Atlantic Ocean. Close meaning 100 yards or 200 yards.
So, Professor Kak, we're now going to talk about this, idea of India, Bharat as a civilization. So, this is our book talk. We'll talk, at length about this. And first of all, I'd like to ask, geographical, is it a geographical expanse of the ancient India? And where from this, etymology comes, the Bharata? Let's start from here. Then move on.
Yeah, the Bharat and India. India is, of course, the popular theory that we read about is people to the east of Sindhu River were called Hindus, and people east of Indus were called the Indians. Now, people, the Chinese also call Indians Indo.
Indo.
But now the question would that one might ask is, the Chinese are not uh, to the west of the Indus. So why do they call Indians Indo? We're not quite sure. Now,
And they can't pronounce H probably. They have the H, some
no, I was
deficiency
not
in the
talking about the H part. I was talking the Indo part.
Indo part.
Like
Okay.
the Indus, because Indus
Right.
is very far. Now, Bharat, the word, the term Bha, the Akshar Bha means wisdom or light. Bharat,
Bharat.
meaning those people who are absorbed in wisdom or absorbed in light. That's one etymology. Another etymology is the descendants of Bharat. And this Bharat is in the Vedic, in the Puranic mythology, who became an emperor. So his descendants are the Bharats. But the name Bharat occurs later as well. So these are the two main etymologies:
Ram's
descendants
brother
of Bharat,
also.
Bharat as a Chakravarti king or Chakravarti emperor, and Bharat, this spiritual, the deeper meaning is those who are absorbed in light, those who are absorbed in wisdom.
Did you write this book to because you were looking at it right from the beginning of your age, and you were finding this enormous understanding of this whole Indology and its strength and the civilization of Bharat, and then finally, because these Victorian, they eclipsed it for 200 years or so, and they literally took kindly. You communicated through your story, as you tell in
See,
other shows.
what happened was, making it a bit personal, about mid 80s, I used to work in AI and I used to work on machine translation. And then I remember that when I was young, my father, who uh, who was orphaned early. He lost his mother when he was 6 months old. Lost his father when he was maybe 8 or 9 years old. Then he was
Oh,
raised by his older brother, who was a professor in Kapurthala in Punjab, professor of philosophy. So my father had been having had a very difficult childhood and outside of Kashmir. So he had been attracted to Sanskrit and all that stuff. And when I was young, he used to tell me that, look, there is this amazing grammar in Sanskrit called Ashtadhyayi by Panini, which represents all of Sanskrit in 4,000 rules. So while doing my AI work, I was
Anani the grammarian.
grammarian, Panini the grammarian. And he was just from outside of Kashmir. He was from a place called Shalatur, outside of Kashmir, in the larger Gandhar region.
Rajar
So
Gandhar. Yeah.
yeah, so I remembered that my father used to talk about this grammar. So let me read this up, and that's when I realized that the histories of India that I'd studied got it totally wrong, because they were trying to explain that Panini created his most amazing grammar, which has not been equal to this day by anybody, including by AI. Nobody has been able to create anything like this, 2,500 years ago. And they said, the standard history said that at that time there was no writing in India, and
Hmm.
writing came only with the Greeks. But how could that be? How could somebody write 4,000 rules without help of writing? 4,000 rules where the sequence of rules matters. You need some aid, and you can't always memorize it because memory has limitations.
Yes.
So I said I must examine it myself. So that's the reason why I started studying Sanskrit literature. I started the Shastras, the sciences, the Jyotish, the Vedas, and
Yes.
so on. And I discovered all of those sciences, on which I wrote many, many papers in the leading scientific journals, which countered the Western view, Western standard view. I even worked on the Indus script in the late 80s. And therefore, I at some point I said, well, I should put it all together in a book. Now, there, of course, in the literature, in the journal literature, I should write that as a book, and that's how the book, The Idea of India, was born.
And I probably you go back to this those periods, and which we are proud of, like you said, Panini, the grammarian, geometry we had, and calculus
Right,
before Newton, and Jyotish, astrology, astronomy, medicines,
right,
hello,
right.
and all these things. Would you kindly give us a very detailed kind of a conceptualization? I mean, not only this was only not only revival and bringing back the information, but there was something more to it which you were adding on.
See, India was, just as I spoke about Sanatan Dharma a few minutes ago, it's all logical and scientific. So, what Indian rishis did was to use logic and science in everything. In music, musicology. You have Sangeet Ratnakar of Sharangdev, for example, right?
Sharangadel,
You have Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra,
Natasha,
using logic and
Lamatensi.
reasoning for theater, for gesture, for music, for drama, for everything. So the Indian rishis used science in all areas, and that's how their study of consciousness, for example, arose, and that's how you can explain it, right? Now, that was not the case in all cultures and civilizations. So that's why India was ahead of other nations. And India's share of the world economy also was about 40 to 50% until 1000. So it was the richest country, which is why everybody wanted to come to India, which is why Europeans discovered America, because they actually wanted to create a new sea path to India, because their uh, overland path to India had been stopped since the Islamic the Turks
By
conquered
Turks.
uh,
Talking.
Asia, the overland route. So India, and why did they want to visit India? Because India was the richest part of the world, and uh, after 1000, after the coming of Islam in India, the share of India's GDP went down from, say, 45% to about 20% by 1800, but it was still very rich. That's why East India Company was interested in India. Now, India's real impoverishment took place during the British rule. From 1800, when Britain got political control over most of India, to 1918, the First World War, India's share of the world economy dropped from 20% to 1.4%. That's when these famines occurred. That's when, and it happened in a very complicated way. Why? Because in the early 1820s, there was the Industrial Revolution that took place in Europe. So Britain created these factories, and they started selling the products of these factories to India, but they didn't allow India to have these factories. So India became a net consumer of British factories, factories in Manchester and elsewhere. And India's own trades and crafts were destroyed to a great extent. And
Indigenous
that
trade.
and then Britain placed these huge tariffs and taxes for its own industrialization, which led to famines in India. And there are estimates that about 100 million um, Indians died in famines.
Oh,
So it was all that story I wanted to set right. I wanted to talk about not only the ancient Indian sciences, and firstly what the Vedas are, what the ancient Indian sciences were, how in spite of its bad economic and political situation, Indian sciences still were central to the creation of modern science. I already mentioned
yes.
Schrodinger's Upanishads, and even Mendeleev's periodic table of chemical elements, and logic, which led to AI, that had its basis in Navya of India, through George Everest, who was the Surveyor General of India, after whom Mount Everest is named, which of course in Nepal is called Sagarmatha. And he was the teacher to, or is the mentor to, three Britishers who created mathematical logic, which is the basis of computers. So India, in spite of its bad situation in the 19th century, was still central to the revolution that was taking place in Europe. So I wanted to set this whole story right. And the idea of India does that through its many different sections, and it talks both about the past, the influence it also had in the medieval times and pre-medieval times in Europe, for example, how it influenced both Western Europe as well as the Slavic world. In fact, the Slavs, which are the Russians, the Poles, the
Russians.
Ukrainians, there before they became Christian, just 1,000 years ago, they worshipped Parjanya, which is another name for Indra, as their chief divinity. And they had another divinity like Shiva, which they called
Rodomo.
Shvetovid, or the knower of light. Vid means the knower in Sanskrit. So they had that. So it's an amazing story that people are not aware of, and your viewers might want to take a look at this book, the idea of India, and they'll find a lot of surprising information, all from peer-reviewed journals. In fact, they'll also be surprised that when Sanskrit books were translated into Chinese for about 1,000 years, and that was the biggest thing going on in China, from 0 to about 1,000 CE, Common Era. Uh, uh, about 25,000 new words were coined in Chinese from Sanskrit because they did not have corresponding analogs. So even Mandarin has 25,000 Sanskrit words as a part of its vocabulary, which people are not aware of.
Yes, yes, that's so amazing. And this book certainly should catch the attention of every youngster. It gives us so detailed and also in-depth study. You also mentioned that Syed Andalus, the mathematician, the script scientist, and the Arabian, who was praising and thinking, telling that this is the most ancient, richest source of science is India,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and then Voltaire in the France and Greece, they understood, and other
It
people
was
before Newton also. Yeah.
Right. It was only in the 19th century when the racist idea of Aryan invasion theory came in, where Europe was trying to create its own past. It didn't have. So it said, no, the Vedas are ours. And we took them to India. Totally ridiculous and foolish and stupid theory. And fortunately, all the new evidence, even genetic evidence, and other statistical evidence is coming out against it.
Yes, that's true. And anyway, we have talked about all this. You talked about astrology, astronomy, Jyotish. I mean, we can't go on. It's a huge subject. I mean, we need to read the book first and to understand it better. But you talked about allopathic practices and this Ayurvedic. And the Paninini's grammar, as you said, that this is still amazes till now. It has not been utilized and written by anybody in the world. And I don't know what are your views about the Max Muller, but yes, I can say that for that matter, if we proceed further, you have discovered this e-dimensional theory hypothesis. We talked about it in the last session as well, dispelling the prevalent understanding over the expanding universe. You derived from the Vaishakya Sutra. I don't know. I mean, you can explain, give it a bit of
Well,
understanding
yeah,
about.
since we yeah last 3 4 years, I've been working on this new idea that space is e-dimensional, and the idea can be the seed of this idea can be seen in the idea of akasha in Vaisheshik Sutra or in Sankhya. You have akash as one of the elements. You
Akash.
have earth, water, uh, fire, air, and akasha. Akasha used to be translated as space, but really akasha is dynamic. And the idea came to me that maybe this akasha refers to, and it's based on a mathematical theorem, refers to the very structure which is a-dimensional. And once you take that, it also explains things of the genetic code and so on. And I published many, many papers in it. And so this could be very fundamental, because if you accept e-dimensionality of physical space, then this current acceleration of the expanding universe can be explained, and how this acceleration will stop in the future, and things would be all right, and it is totally in conformity with the Vedantic idea that you have creation and dissolution in stages, right? The Shiva's dance, Nataraja's dance, Shiva's
Natarajan.
dance, creation and then destruction.
Simultaneously.
This is
He does it
this is
simultaneously.
yeah, this is simultaneously within the individual, but also at the cosmic level, because whatever happens at the individual level also happens at the cosmic level. So everything seems to come together. So I'm hoping that all this will spread beyond the pages of scientific journals, where many articles have been published already, and more into public discourse, and that'll be nice, because all this has seeds within it of solution of many other problems. Because if all information is e-dimensional, then possibly it should also be of use in the study of medical information, biological information, and that might
Yes.
provide clues to how future advances in biology and medicine may take place.
Kashmiris celebrate Mahashivratri in a very different way. And they are the proud owner of, they say that Mahashiva, this, Tarkashastra, although Tarkashastra is the same as Vedanta, it cannot be disconnected with Vedanta, which I fully agree with you. But the celebration, apart from the story of Shiv Parvati or Shiva Shakti, could you kindly, I mean, elucidate us with some universal essence and effect of this whole
Well,
ritualistic story part to the consciousness part?
Shivratri, Mahashivratri.
Yeah.
Okay, the story is, of course, Parvati
Yeah.
decides that she should marry Shiva, and she does this tremendous tapasya, right? She becomes Aparna. She doesn't even take leaves. Parna means leave. Aparna. She doesn't even eat anything. And finally, Shiva appears, and this is a marriage. You know what this really story is all about? Is about every individual. Each human being is, our body is the goddess, right? Materiality, whatever is Prakriti is the goddess. Prakriti is the goddess. Parvati is Prakriti also.
Prakriti, yeah.
So if only we do tapasya, that is when Shiva will appear, because tapasya is that heat. Tapas means heat. Through this heat and suffering, you have to take the coverings off your mind. And when you take the coverings off your mind, Shiva appears. Shiva in all his glory appears, right? And that is the story of Mahashivaratri. It is the marriage of Shiva and Parvati, right? It's as a at the universal scale, because this happens also at the cosmic level. And at the cosmic level, on the Mahashivratri morning, when you see sunrise, Shiva as the sun. In fact, this is true. You can check it out. As the sun rises, just on the tip of the circle of the Shiva will be the crescent moon, and
Krishna.
yeah, you'll see on Shivratri crescent moon on top of the rising sun, and on the background is Akash Ganga, which is
Hmm.
shown as the
Milky
Ganga
Way.
coming out of the locks of Shiva, right? So this is also something at the cosmic plane, which is then worshipped at the individual level. And I remember I have wonderful memories of Mahashivratri, puja for days in our house in Sattu Barbarsha. And we also used to play those cowdies, right?
Kauri, yeah, that was.
We,
It's a,
we
it's, it's a
lot of
Pandav culture. Pandava
yeah,
culture of Pandav. Yeah.
absolutely. We used to have a lot of fun and we'll
Mahabharata.
be awake the whole night and so on. So I think this was to be dedicated. It's just like, just like you have to cleanse every day, you also
Hmm.
have one day of the year where you do this cleansing of your heart in a fundamental way, in a major celebration. So I think Mahashivratri is a beautiful idea, um,
Yeah.
from which must have in its own way um, transformed me. And the whole idea of all of these celebrations is self transformation, right?
Self
All of us
transformation.
need to be, yeah, we need to be transformed to be free, ultimately to find that Shiva within us.
Very briefly, I would like to know scientific Indic wisdom explanation about the importance of 108
Oh
normality.
yeah, okay. This goes back to 1992, another millennium.
Uh,
1992. I was reading this magazine, The New Yorker, and the author John Updike, who's an American novelist, he had written, "Hey, isn't it amazing that the size of the sun and the moon is about the same looking from the
uh,
Earth?" Which is true. Which is why you have eclipses. And suddenly, through Hiranyagarbha, something happened at that moment. I can even remember it. I knew it had something to do with the Rig Veda. So I went to my other room with the library and I looked up the organization of the Rig Veda. I discovered that the Rig Veda has 1017 hymns or suktas, 1017 hymns. 1017 is 339 times 3. Now the 3 comes in because of Vidya. The Vedic wisdom is triple, right? There are threes. Everything is in threes: birth, maintenance, destruction, right? Yesterday, today, tomorrow. Everything is in threes. Icha,
yeah.
Shakti, Gyan Shakti, and Kriya Shakti. Everything is in threes. So 339 times 3 is 1017. Now, if the sun is 108 times away, its diameter away from Earth, from sunrise to sunset, you'll have 339 uh, circles
Hmm.
from sunrise to sunset.
Oh,
339. And that is where the secret of 108 was hidden. That the sun is 108 times its diameter from the earth. The moon is 108 times its diameter from the earth, which is true.
oh,
And it's also true that the diameter of the sun is 108 times the diameter of the earth. Isn't that amazing? And because the outer is mirrored in the inner, in our sadhana, we are
reflection.
we are supposed to do 108 japas, because
Yes,
you
we
are
have a
making a
reading.
symbolic journey from the earth, which is your body, to the inner sun, who is the Shiva within you, right? So that's why you have 108 dance poses uh, in Bharatanatyam,
Bharatanatyam.
which are already inscribed in temples 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. Those 108 dance poses. These are secret knowledge about it. These are secret Sanatan knowledge, which people can uh, inspire themselves to get on this path to freedom, because ultimately, if there is one purpose to life, it is to attain that freedom, to become one with Shiva within ourselves. And that is something that the great Shaiva masters, like Somadeva, like Abhinav Gupta, Utpal Dev,
Abhinav Gupta,
all of these,
Shambhunath,
yeah,
Utpal
all
Deva.
of them have been telling the world, hey, freedom is for you to gain. Have faith in yourself. Follow this path of self knowledge. And we want everybody to have it, not just those who are born in the Sanatan faith, like you and I, but everybody else, because there is only one truth. And that
Hmm.
truth can be had by every human being.
That's so wonderful. And one more question. I mean, it is slightly, I can't say political, it's geographical, and, lesser existential. Zoroastrian Tangerism, Eurasia, Mongolia, they were practicing this. Is ancient religion any connection and similarities with Hinduism and Indic religion in those
Of
times?
course, I do mention all of these things in my book, The Idea of India, all these connections. I already mentioned Slavic religion with their worship of the four-faced Svetovid, a representation of Shiva. And you know what these four faces were? The top face was called Svarga, Svarog. The left face was called Parjanya. The lower face was called Ladha, which is pleasant, which is the name for
Yes.
earth. And the east coast was called Mokosh or Moksha. So they had Sanskrit names. The four faces also had Sanskrit names. Yeah, Zoroastrianism, it's very interesting. They have
Fire worshipping, sun worshipping goes very as back as.
absolutely, and also, they have this ceremony where a sash is bound around the waist, for just like Yagyopavit for men. But
Yes.
Kashmiri Pandit women also used to have I forget the name. They used to wear a kind of a string around the waist. I forget the name of it. I've written on it.
The very old ladies kind.
Yeah, but it used to be a part of everybody. Now it's been forgotten. So there
It was
are
in this old attire, yeah, in those times.
yeah. Right.
I know
But
it was white. Yeah.
even in India, even women used to have Yagyopavit. In fact, there are these murtis of the goddess with Yagyopavit. So knowledge was not just Yagyopavit was not just for men, but also for women and for everybody. Anybody who's prepared to go through this path of tapas, of self-search, where at the end of this search there are beautiful fruits to be had. uh, we welcome everybody to it,
That's
even those in Kashmir who may have been separated from it. You are our brothers and sisters. Come back to it, come back to this path.
everything.
This is beautiful.
That's wonderful. That's tricky question, not a question, just a curiosity. I want to. Why do you displease the consciousness of Pramila Thapar so much? And you say that Indo-Aryan, you dispel with the Indo-Aryan theory, and you say Aryans are indigenous to India.
No, Ramila Thapar wrote a book on early India, ancient India, many years ago, 60 years ago.
Yeah.
My research shows, in fact, I have a new book coming out next month or the month after called Saka Language and Sanskrit. And this is a book on the ancient language of what is Xinjiang, Khotan. And that language is
Xinjiang.
called Shaka language or Saka language,
Sakal.
where I show, and I have also discussion of Kashmiri there. I show that many aspects of that language can be understood from the perspective of Kashmiri. And it's most natural to see that part of the world as an extension of Kashmir. And as you mentioned, Kumar Jeev, who went there from Kashmir, his mother was from Kucha,
She
but
was there. Father was a Kashmir.
but his father was a Kashmiri. So this then will explain the origin of the Indo-European languages. I think it appears modern theories are showing that it was not in Europe, it was not in Ukraine, it was south of Caucasus. In fact, a recent paper that was published, and I discussed that at length in this new upcoming book, it was south of Caucasus, and maybe it was from the region around northwest India, from Kashmir. Kashmir may have been quite close to the very heartland of
That
of that linguistic world.
One controversial question at the end. You will tell me that I was telling you the whole story. At the end, you are again at the same position. Concept of God. Does it exist in Indology? Brahma, call it
Of course,
Brahma or Shiva. Small
God,
God, not
God,
small God. Capital G. Capital G.
God is in Sanskrit is Ishvara, the actual enjoyer. Ishvara is within you. It's another name for Shiva. So the one who enjoys, because otherwise we are Pashu. There's no freedom. Humans
Okay.
without freedom are Pashu. They are animals. They are only doing what is expected of them or what
There's no emancipation.
society makes them do. But there is God.
Hmm.
God is Ishvara. And there is the word God itself is Sanskritic. And I mentioned this. I don't know whether I mentioned it in Idea of India, but my new book called um, The Vedic Tradition, which is coming out also next month. It's a big book, 500 pages.
Oh,
There's a chapter on it on the word God. The word God can be traced back to Gandhara region, to Kashmir and Gandhara region. In a word,
Afghanistan.
the etymology is Swatava. Swatava. Swa means self, Tava means power. Swatava, when it went to Persian, it became Khota. And from there became Khuda. And from
Yeah.
Khuda came God. So it is actually the word God is Swatava, self power. And
Khuda
there
seems to
is
be Khuda seems to be very well, connected with what we think about Ishwar. Khuda is self.
absolutely. And the
Yeah.
word is Sanskritic. Even the word Khuda is from Swatava,
Khuda.
is is like swat means khud, khudi ko kar buland itna, right? Khud
Banda
itself is
Singh.
swat. So it is there is a word for God. It is Ishvara. Really, if you take the popular word or if you take the less popular word, scholarly word swatava, that also means khuda.
And nowadays, I think because even in the Sanatan Parampara, Hindu Parampara also, we are now stuck and we are infatuated, or rather intoxicated by the rituals, the lower domains of this Sanatan. And very less among us try to, even get emancipate from that. Besides that, this Vatavriksha, which is Vedantic or which is, Sanatan, there are the branches all over, the great branches, and the updation of experiential updation by the great saints who came across. Like we have this Mahavira in the Jain Parampara, and we have Buddha, the Jain Parampara, this Buddha in the Buddha Parampara, and then finally we have this, Sikhism, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, and our nine gurus whom we bow in prostration. Uh, they are, they have an indelible perennial connection with the flow of Sanatan. Why are they, although we are also disregarding our own system and traditions, but at the same time, why are these branches not being taken as from the same Vatavriksha, same banyan tree?
It is the same Vatavriksha. This is a Sanatan river, is a huge river, and these are branches which have gone off for some time, but that is part of the process.
Updation, need of the
But
time. Yeah.
it's for the Sanatan to put everything in perspective. And that's what we are trying to do. That's what your podcast is trying to do through its conversations. This is what my books are trying to do through their conversation, because it's natural for people to step apart and then come back. These are like on a river bank, there are these eddies and then they rejoin. So it's perfectly natural for these branches from this Vatavriksha to feel separate for some time, but ultimately
Come back to the main river.
they come back together. Yeah.
You said
So
wonderfully someday that somewhere you said very wonderfully that even if somebody becomes Gnostic, it is good. He's honest.
absolutely
He's seeking.
questioning.
He's seeking
Ultimately,
something.
uh,
He's
the,
disappointed. Yeah.
the Vedic way is about questioning, because you discover yourself only through questioning. You must question everything.
Conversations.
Absolutely. Conversation. It's questioning and through conversation. Not only should you have conversation with Jugal Kaulji, but also with yourself.
Oh, I've taken a lot of your time, but I know. I mean, I wish you a long life and good health. And at this age, you're so young, so vibrant. You inspire all of us. But at the same time, we want to read you first, and I wish that all of our youngsters who are witness this program, please go through these books. Although I'm asking you, I have to also order some books from Amazon. I'll probably start from the Idea of India and then gradually go to the other wonderful books that Professor Saab has written. You said in the earlier part of this first component of this conversation that you wanted to be a poet. I also wanted to be a poet. I write poetry, but occasionally, not regular. So why not to conclude this beautiful session by one of your poem, which is
Oh,
close to
oh,
your heart.
okay. I have written many books of poetry, both in Hindi and English. I have, I think, 9 books. But here, since you mentioned this before we got on the show,
Yeah.
I this is a poem I wrote many years ago, about 45 years ago. It's called A Wounded Bird, and it's in my collection Arrival and Exile,
Oh,
which is
beautiful.
freely available. So this is more of an emotional poem, because poetry can also be philosophical, spiritual. This is more emotional. Okay, so here it is: A Wounded Bird.
Hmm.
You
Ah,
said
beautiful.
I was a bird with a broken wing. I'm afraid that when you have nursed me to health, I might fly away.
Oh,
The sadness in your eyes haunts me. When you have given me life and I take my lonely flight, can I help that? Will it not break your heart? Why do you breathe life into me when it will be the death of both of us?
oh, that's so good.
Do not grieve at my stony face. My heart warms to your every smile, every touch. I almost feel the strength to fly. Shall I get well and lose you?
Beautiful.
That I love you is clear, since I ask you for nothing. I would love you even if you went away, leaving my wing bleeding.
Oh,
I feel guilty that my condition made you interrupt your play. No, you have hung around me for many days now, stroking my feathers, dressing my wounds. Can I ever repay you? Uh, you have whispered in my ears that I look so weak and worn that you must help me. And what patience! I haven't spoken. You still console me with your beautiful words. Now it goes on and on. I will stop here, and but you get the idea.
that's
You get the
beautiful.
idea.
That's I
This
got
is
an idea. We got
it's a love
essence.
poem, as you can see.
It's a lot. You start with it start. I wanted to. We'll close down with one more question. I am a conversationalist. I will not. That is the padarth love. Because I written somewhere that from bipolarity, it's not a bipolar expanse. It's a universal expansion. So it ignites somewhere down this love story between the two. It ignites it, and it somewhere down. This is what I my understanding, little understanding. Would you think it's right what I'm thinking?
Love, like other emotions, is paradoxical. It's both coming together and getting apart. And
Yes.
people forget that. They feel that you know that then you don't need any everybody. People fall in love, they also need space, and there is a paradox behind it. And that paradox is, while love is about possession, it's also about giving up everything, and it's a balance ultimately. And that's
Free
why
freedom.
it can only be approached in an aesthetic sense through shringar ras. You
Shringara
can't
Ras.
approach it logically. You can't approach it logically at all. It's when you go beyond logic. Yeah, I've written on love, and in the book Eternal Bharat, as well as Whispers from the Past, the book on Kashmir, you'll find discussion of this. And as a poet, the whole idea of complexity, the whole idea of the paradox behind this emotion is very dear to me.
That's so, that's so wonderful. With that, we'd like to conclude today's wonderful session with Subhaji. I think he was very much preoccupied, and despite of everything, he came down. And I know this is the morning in America, and here we are just going for the bed. But he was there right at the time and preparing for this. I'm really grateful to you, your magnanimity that you came to the show. I am very overwhelmed and filled with joy. I think this will be a great, great, wonderful, conversation, which will be, which whosoever witnesses will definitely be benefited. And I'm certainly want everyone to read the books of Subhashji and watch this conversation and have your comments and understanding. Thank you very much, Subhashji. You came. I'm grateful to you. Long life, good health. Keep smiling as you are, and keep writing and inspiring us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jugalji. Namaskar. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jugalji.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. So that was Professor Subhash Kak. I hope I enjoyed every bit of this conversation, and I wanted to, completely, compartment put everything of his knowledge into one conversation, which is not possible. You can't put a ocean into a river. But then again, I've tried to do it smartly, and I have been able to touch the major points. But I think he's a real encyclopedia, a real genius of our times, and we should relish what he writes, and we should relish what he speaks. We must watch his videos, read his papers, and read his books. And with that, I would like to conclude. But before going, my favorite poetess and my mother's favorite poetess, Mahadevi Verma, and my favorite poem, and that is it's also the fourth pillar of Chayava. Chayava, the film. It's a spiritual romance we were just talking about. तुम मुझ में प्रिय फिर परिचय क्या, तुम मुझ में प्रिय फिर परिचय क्या, तारक में छवि प्राणों में स्मृति, तारक में छवि प्राणों में स्मृति, पलकों में नीरव पद की गति, लघु उर में पुलकों की संस्कृति, बरलाई हूं तेरी चंचल, और करूं जग में संचय क्या, तू मुझ में प्रिय फिर परिचय क्या, चिंतित तू. This is universal, this is beautiful, this is metaphysics, and this is the essence of poetry. चित्रित तू मैं रेखा क्रम, चित्रित तू मैं रेखा क्रम, मधुर राग तू मैं स्वर संगम, तू असीम मैं सीमा का भ्रम, तुम मुझ में पिया फिर परिचय क्या. Thank you very much. With that wonderful couplet and song, this poetry from Mahadevi Verma, I conclude today's session. It was very exhilarating, enriching, entertaining as well, but we had a lot much information and understood this great personality and his writing today. Thank you very much. Good night. Jai Hind. Shab Khair. Namaskar. Good night.